Welcome to Quicksand, the most important news in pharma and biotech this week. Celgene, a Summit, New Jersey-based biotech company specializing in treatments for multiple myeloma, said it had agreed to acquire Impact Biomedicines for as much as $7 billion, subject to certain milestones associated with regulatory hurdles and sales performance. The acquisition will add a late-stage candidate, fedratinib, a highly selective JAK2 kinase inhibitor, to Celgene's pipeline. The candidate is being developed for the treatment of myelofibrosis and polycythemia vera. Fedratinib demonstrated statistically significant improvements in the primary and secondary endpoints of splenic response and total symptom score, respectively, in a randomized placebo-controlled phase 3 pivotal trial for treatment-naive myelofibrosis. The deal is structured in three parts, with Celgene paying $1.1 billion in cash upfront for the San Diego-based company. Celgene will pay an additional $1.4 billion depending on the receipt of FDA milestone approvals. Finally, Celgene will make payments depending on sales, with a maximum of $4.5 billion due if annual net sales of Impact's treatments exceed $5 billion. After running 4 months without a proper new name following the completion of the $7.4 billion merger, INC Research and InVentiv Health were finally reborn as Syneos Health. The new name, created by branding agency Addison Whitney, communicates two parts of information. Syn represents the value of synchronizing clinical and commercial capabilities offered by the old INC and InVentiv, respectively, while Neo champions a new approach to biopharma solutions, the company said. During the company's third quarter earnings call in November, the company stated it remained on track to achieve the $100 million annual cost savings by 2020. Despite a few headwinds on the commercial side, including unprecedented levels of cancellations of drug programs, the company said there is significant interest in its unique combination of service offerings and insights, particularly in the small to mid-sized market segment. With the name change, the company will be traded on NASDAQ under the ticker SYNH. The EMA announced the adoption of a guideline first drafted in 2011 on the clinical evaluation of medicinal products in the treatment of the autoimmune disease rheumatoid arthritis. The guideline, which is set to take effect July 1, 2018, features sections on the criteria and standards for patient selection, possible indications or treatment goals, how to assess efficacy, the strategy and design of clinical trials, clinical safety evaluations, and studies in special populations including the elderly and children. This document is a revision of the points to consider adopted in November 2003, EMA said. The agency further stated, pharmacological therapy has advanced for rheumatoid arthritis in the last decade. Therapeutic strategies employing more intensive intervention in early disease, often using combinations of non-biologic and biologic disease-modifying anti-rheumatic drugs, have shown a faster onset of action and more profound clinical responses than traditional approaches. EMA noted that the optimum treatment goal is remission, or at least low disease activity, in patients that do not respond to earlier treatments. In terms of what has changed since 2003, the guidelines said new classification criteria for rheumatoid arthritis have been developed and validated by the American College of Rheumatology's European League Against Rheumatism that allows for earlier drug intervention. EMA has added sections on multi-dose containers to its Quality of Medicines question and answer document. The new sections cover the design of and claims for in-use shelf life for solid oral dosage forms in multi-dose containers. The design section clarifies that companies need to run in-use stability studies on tablets, capsules, and other solid oral dosage forms in multi-dose containers if there is an indication from stability and/or stress studies that the drug product may be susceptible to deterioration. If there is such an indication, EMA expects companies to run stability studies under long-term conditions. The exact length of the study will depend on the intended use of the drug. If patients will only need one multi-dose container for the duration of the treatment, the manufacturer should run studies that are at least as long as they will be on the drug. For drugs that are only used intermittently, EMA expects companies to assess whether in-use stability fails within 6 months. If not, no in-use shelf life is needed. When assessing the stability of intermittently needed drugs, manufacturers should incorporate less than daily opening of the container into their designs. This mimics the likely frequency with which patients will open the container and therefore affect the stability of the solid oral dosage form it contains. The Swiss Agency for Therapeutic Products, or Swissmedic, has liberalized its rules on the comparators used in biosimilar clinical trials. Swissmedic is now allowing biosimilar developers to use comparators sourced from the United States. That marks a change in the policy Swissmedic established when it formally adopted biosimilar rules last year. At that point, Swissmedic only permitted the use of comparators from the European Union or Switzerland in the main studies of biosimilars. The updated guidance adds the US to the list, but companies that opt to source comparators from across the Atlantic will face additional regulatory requirements. If the product is obtained from the USA for the comprehensive comparability studies with the biosimilar, including safety and efficacy, three-way bridging between the biosimilar, the EU, and the US comparator product must be carried out, Swissmedic wrote in its updated guidance. Companies that work with EU comparators only need to perform bridging with the Swiss reference product. Swissmedic also used an update to liberalize its rules on the origins of drugs used in complementary biosimilar studies. The changes see Canada join Japan on a list of countries that can supply product for use in these trials. Regardless of whether the product comes from Canada or Japan, Swissmedic expects the company to compare them to the EU product. Direct bridging to the reference product is not needed. The final notable change to the guidance sees Swissmedic follow the EMA in requiring inclusion of an environmental risk assessment in filing for approval of biosimilars. Companies can skirt the requirement if they provide an appropriate reason. Thank you for listening to Quicksand, episode 13, January 15th, 2018.